Danny Thomas, Jimmy Durante. He set up the first microwave telecast in Illinois with the aid of Bill Cusack, who later became my chief engineer when I inherited the management of WBKB in 1953. And Bill Eddy was a consultant of mine when I launched WF. And I had the honor of delivering Bill Eddy's eulogy at his funeral in Michigan City in the fall of '89. I'll close with these remarks from the eulogy. I have always believed that Bill Eddy was truly a Renaissance man. He was an inventor, a pilot, an artist, an entrepreneur, and a true genius. Knowing him made the lives of all of us knew him much better, and I'm happy to say I started with him. Much more rewarding and much more fun if you knew him at all. So what more can you ask of a fellow human being? And I accept this on behalf of his family. He has a son that we cannot locate, William Eddy Jr. We will locate him, and I'm sure the Museum of Broadcast Communication will retain custody of this award until we find Bill Eddy Jr. So this guy was great. With that, I'll zip my mouth and say thank you.
When I came to Channel 5 in the mid-'60s, I was very young and very apprehensive.
Some people, as they say, need no introduction. And after the year she just had, our next presenter is probably tops on that list. Earlier this month, she won a Peabody Award for journalistic ethics and investigative reporting. After 18 years at WMAQ-TV, she joined CBS News and WBBM-TV in 1997 as an investigative reporter. She is also a contributor to CBS News primetime magazine, Public Eye with Bryant Gumbel. She has won countless local and national Emmys, is a member of the Chicago Journalism Hall of Fame, and in 1997 was the recipient of the Chicago Headline Club's Courage in Journalism Award. Chicago native Carol Marin.
Every one of us in this room who is associated with television is here because someone else helped pave the way. For the women in this room, I think this is especially true. And we owe a great debt to the women who came first. We owe a great debt to Jory Luloff. In 1965, when she joined NBC Channel 5, it's hard to know from the press releases which was the more revolutionary concept. The advent of all-color programming, which they were touting at the time, or the, quote, startling innovation of hiring a newsgirl as anchorman. It is not easy to be first. And you need read only one article in the esteemed Chicago Daily News, no less, to understand how hard it was, how much we have forgotten about that time, maybe because we needed to forget. The 1969 article is titled Television's Newsgirls. It's a profile of Jory and 3 other female reporters, one for each of the 4 stations, BBM, MAQ, LS, and WGN. Only 4 women reporters in town. The first line of the article, when I read it, took my breath away. It begins, quote, like Negroes, television's newswomen are tokens. The WBBM newsgirl is cited for her marvelously healthy figure, her ability to be aggressive but feminine, the most difficult task facing a woman reporter. The article worries about women. If they're too aggressive, they sound like fishwives. Even some of the so-called newsgirls who shared this article with Jory felt that women couldn't do the same reporting as men. One of them said, "It looks dreadful, horrible to be sticking a mic under Jimmy Hoffa's nose. Men can do that." Sexism and racism combined in another paragraph of the article. The writer notes that at WLS Channel 7, they chose not to air a story of a 1968 Southside riot because the televised image of their reporter, quote, "a sexy blonde in the black ghetto," might further inflame the situation. Joy Luloff fought all of those notions. She simply did news the way it ought to be done. The same article, in a backhanded way, kind of takes note of it. It says, quote, "Ms. Luloff has managed the trick of delivering the news and still being feminine because her delivery," I love this, "her delivery has the asexual characteristics of detachment and scrupulous objectivity." Detachment and scrupulous objectivity. I don't consider those asexual characteristics. Those are standards. Those were Jory's standards. And they were accompanied by great intelligence and grace and dignity and professionalism. That's what Joy Luloff gave television news. And in doing so, she, as probably the first woman anchor in the country for a major serious newscast, opened doors for those of us who would follow. She made the road a little less bumpy and the possibilities for women in news greater than they had been. She's done it all from print to television, from anchoring and reporting to commentary. That Daily News writer in 1969 at least said one thing that I could agree with. He said, "Women might take pride in seeing one of their own make it." Well, you know, we do. It is a great honor to present the Silver Circle Award to Joy Luloff.
Thank you very much, Carol. I have to thank an awful lot of people. Diana Bory and NBC for making their editing facilities available to me. I appreciate it so much. And most especially for making John Martin available to do that piece. It was such a joy to work with John again. John, I thank you so much. It was really fun. When I came to Channel 5 back in the mid-60s, I was really very fortunate. By some quirk of timing, I arrived at the dawn of what became the golden years at Channel 5 here in Chicago. And the leadership of the station was legendary and wonderful. Bob Lemon was the general manager, and Bill Corley, of course, was the news director. These were very special people, as anybody can tell you. They had wisdom, they had integrity, they had intelligence, they had loyalty. And naive as I was back in those days, I thought that's how all TV executives were. Imagine my surprise. Later on, many years later, when I went on to Channel 7, I was at the behest of Dennis Swanson, who was also a wonderful leader. But in between, there was something of a vast wasteland, managerially speaking, in Chicago television. At least the stations I worked at, there was. But I do have an awful lot of folks to thank. It is hard to see up here, my God. My very first producer, I must thank, the poor man. He's given the very challenging task of teaching me about television and specifically about film, which I never really did get the hang of it. Scott Craig, he was very patient with me and very, very kind to me. Another very, very dear friend I made way back in the early days, who's remained my friend forever, I'm very proud and happy to say, and has given me wonderful advice along the line at crucial moments, Bob Smith, who is also here today. Then there were the noon show producers. Now these people are real heroes under fire. There was the late Lorraine Weiss, of course, who we all miss very, very much. There's a truly heroic breed. The very first noon show producer was Darrell Strong, and he is also here today, I'm very happy to say. He had an especially tough road to hoe. When we started the noon show back in the mid-60s, I don't believe that anybody in television was doing a serious half hour of news that early in the day. And there were a lot of qualms about whether it really could be done. Remember, this was pre-tape, we were dealing with film, 40 minutes to get the film out of the soup. To put together a news show by noon was really a very big deal, and Darrell Strong did it in spades. He was absolutely fantastic, and he set the standard, which held for a very, very long time. Phil Walters, who was here and had to leave, which is probably fortunate for him, went on to greater fame as a Chicago television reporter. However, Phil was also a noon show producer, a very memorable one. I think everybody who knows him would agree. Phil was dubbed very early on, maybe by Bill Heitz, by some of our directors. He was dubbed Captain Chaos because he had this way of handing you a script about 2 minutes before airtime. He'd give a copy to the director and a copy to me and whatever, and we'd go through it, and there would be all these blank pages with nothing on them. And he said, well, it's all coming in, it's all coming in. So we'd all kind of, drag our way through the show as fast as we could, improvising all the way. But if Phil was good at getting us into trouble, which he was very, very good at, he was also very good at getting us out of trouble, which is probably because he had so much practice. I wish you were here to hear that, darn it. We also had wonderful directors to work with, and they saved our skin more than a few times. Guys like Tony Verdi and Bill Heitz, who is here today. They were so quick, they were so clever, they were so wonderful and so smart and so funny. It was such a joy to work with all of them. I adore them all dearly. They were just wonderful. Also, Jerry Taft, who is here today, did the weather on the noon show for a very, very long time, and it was always an absolute joy to work with. He was wonderful, and still is, as far as I know. In later years, we were lucky enough to have the PR brilliance of Ella Struble, who is also here today. And last but by no means least, I really must thank Don Ephraim, who is a wonderful person, a great friend, and an absolutely superb agent. I love Don because he pays attention to what his client wants rather than just cutting a deal. And I also love Don because he is a fellow chocoholic. I could always tell how things were going during a negotiation. When we had lunch, and if Don ordered just the lunch and no dessert, then I knew everything was going very, very well. But if you sat down and ordered for dessert 2 big hunks of chocolate cake dripping in chocolate icing, I knew there was a problem. And we would eat our way right through it. And last but not least, I do have to thank my wonderful husband, Richard Friedman, who is absolutely terrific, as you all know. When we were first married, I would come home at night and, we'd say what went on at the office today, what did you do and all this stuff. And I would regale him with tales of things that had happened that very day at the studio, at the station. And for about 8 months, he thought I was putting him on. He thought I made up all this stuff, and it was all absolutely true. And he finally learned to believe me, because it was so outrageous. And if you want to feel really old, and make me feel really old too, I will tell you that next week, we are celebrating our 27th wedding anniversary. See how old you are? A few months ago, when Floyd Calver retired, we had a reunion of a lot of the people who worked in the Channel 5 newsroom during the golden years. And I can tell you, it was an awful lot of fun. It was wonderful to see all those people again. And it brought back some wonderful memories of the television years. But it also made me realize how very, very, very fortunate I have been to work in an industry with so many bright, intelligent, quick, and funny people. They weren't always the nicest people in the world. They certainly were not the most reverent people in the world, but they were the most intelligent and the funniest and the most quick-witted people I've ever had the pleasure of being with, and it's been a joy to be with them. The shows were fine, but in the end it was the people who made it all a joy. And I'm so grateful to all of them, just as I am so grateful to all of you for this honor. I thank you very, very much.